Welcome to episode 55 of How About Them Huskies. I'm Connor, and I'm joined by Andrew, and this is a historic day for the history of the UConn program. For the first time since March of 2009, your Connecticut Huskies are ranked number one in the AP poll. Obviously, it's just a number at the end of the day. It's January 15th. It doesn't matter for March, but it's just an awesome accomplishment seeing how we've been up and down the past, I guess, 15 years in that since our last number one. We've won three titles. We've also had a handful of sub 500 seasons. It's just really awesome to see that number one next to our name, especially in the matchups we'll have in the next week, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes here. But Andrew, what was your initial reaction? Obviously, we kind of expected to see the number one after all that went down in the past week in college basketball. What was your initial reaction actually seeing it come true?
I mean, it's special for everybody. Like I was saying, my dad had texted me and he said that I had never seen this before because the last time they were number one, I was just about 4 years old and didn't really know what basketball was. So it's special for everybody. It's special for the older people who have been fans of this team for a long time, but it's special for the young people too, like me and you, Connor, who have been fans of this team for a pretty long time and have never really seen them be number one. So it's really special for everybody. And I hate that people say it doesn't matter in March, but it's a really cool thing for everybody to see.
Yeah, I was obviously everything's coming out about that 2009 team, Kemba Walker's freshman season at UConn,
Freshman
coming off the
Stan
bench.
Robinson,
Yeah, all those guys. Hasheem to beat. We've had a lot of really good teams and good players since then, and they didn't even
Craig
get.
Aguirre, even
Yeah, they didn't get to the level that this team has gotten to, and I'm honestly shocked because we've done this without Donovan Clingan. I mean, if you were to tell me when he went down against Seton Hall that we'd be ranked number one in less than a month and he didn't play a single minute, I wouldn't have believed you. I'd say there's no way, but this group figured it out. We're gonna get to the team in a second. I want to talk about the poll while I have it up here and while it's hot. We were obviously number one, 39 first place votes. 1542 total points. We had 36 more total points than Purdue, who had 20 first place votes. That was really our only real competition for the net number one spot because they were the previous number one. They lost to Nebraska, though, which isn't as bad as the loss as it has been over the past like half decade or so, but you still can't lose to Nebraska if you're Purdue. Kansas had three first place votes, and UNC, who is actually up to number four in the poll, had a first place vote. And I feel like that win's going to go a long way. Even though it was
yeah,
in December, people say, oh, Carolina's a better team now. I don't care if they're the better team now. Maybe they are on paper. Who knows? But either way, we have that win against them. And the ACC is kind of weak. I think they have a really good chance to run through it. That could potentially be a win over a one seed going into Selection Sunday. But Houston fell to number five. They suffered a couple of losses. I don't think they're going to really struggle in the Big 12, in my opinion. They already lost two road games, but Tennessee fell to six. They were in the top five. And after that, there's a couple of Big East schools down there 17 Marquette, 18 Creighton, who we play Wednesday. And Seton Hall, surprisingly to me, wasn't in the poll. I thought for sure how they've been playing the past couple of weeks, they get in, especially with all the teams that were losing. But they're, I believe, the third team off. So if they keep on winning, they'll get there eventually. But yeah, man, number one in the AP poll. It's awesome to hear, but we got to protect it. And that starts against Creighton on Wednesday. But before that, we had a game yesterday against Georgetown, which it was an interesting game, I'd say. It was one of those weird games where you never thought you were going to lose, but like you never broke away to that 20 point, even that 20-point projected spread you were supposed to win by. But overall, I think the key takeaway from this is Alex Caravan should be Big East Player of the Year as of right now. I mean, we can get into the awards and how he hasn't won Big East Player of the Week yet, but I don't know. He's just been incredible. He was in a funk about a month ago, around that like around the non-conference play, he was in a funk, but he's really out of it. He's shooting like 75% from three over his past four games. He's put up 26 points and he hit six threes against Georgetown. I'm gonna start advocating for this. I feel like we're the best team in the Big East. He is kind of separating himself as the best player on the best team in the Big East. I think right now Alex Caravan should be Big East Player of the Year.
absolutely. I've got a couple of things to say about we just talked about. First of all, I'm going to correct myself. I mixed up way too many names because I know a million. It's Big 24 be Craig Austry, not Aguirre. I don't know where I got that from, but it's Craig Austry, starter on the 08-09 team. Connecticut legend, I might say. Um, but yes, Caravan. I mean, I don't know what else he needs to do to get the Big East Player of the Week. Does he need to save the world from an alien invasion? Like, what do you want him to do? He put 26 points on the board. I mean, seriously, what else do they want him to do? Um, and then the Georgetown game, I mean, when was the last time we played good against Georgetown? Not last season. I don't think the one before that either. So it's just weird that we always play bad against Georgetown, but also always end up winning. Um, but I mean, I wasn't necessarily mad about yesterday's game. I mean, we hadn't played in a little bit of time, a couple of days. That's not necessarily an excuse, but also just the fact that Georgetown, what was that guy's name? Cook. We hadn't really played a guy like him because the Xavier game was physical. Um, Even the St. John's game was physical, but we hadn't really played a guy like Cook who was just always up in everybody's grill. We just really hadn't played that. And I feel like we struggled with him, but then he was being stupid and got fouled out of the game because of technicals when he got into his little situation with Newton. But overall, I'm not really mad at that game with Georgetown. I think we played fine.
Yeah, I feel like you hit on it really well. Every year it feels like Georgetown plays us close. They never beat us, but well, just the past three games, this one never really felt 100% comfortable like we're gonna win. It was like it's 8 point game, it's a 10 point game, back to eight. Oh, it's down to six now. They really stayed in it the whole time. Remember last year, we played our closest win of the season at Georgetown. It was, I believe we
I
won
think
by
it was
7.
two. It was down to two at one point. I
It
know
was,
that.
but I think we with fouls and free throws we got
Yeah.
up to around 7. But that was our closest win of the year in DC, and obviously the Joey Calcaterra game in Gampel. I believe that's 2022 now. That's
Yep.
almost not almost 2 years, but two
December
calendar years
14th.
ago. Yeah, so they always play us tight, even if they don't have the most competitive teams. But I'd say this year's Georgetown squad is definitely a lot better than last year's and the year before. You mentioned Supreme Cook, right out of our backyard from Fairfield, the Fairfield transfer. He had 18 and 13 before he fouled out. He's not a guy you should be allowing 18 and 13 do. He's clearly a solid big man down there, but I don't know. That kind of goes on Sampson and Caravan. You can't be bullied like that by a guy who has no business bullying you, especially because we kind of controlled Soriano against St. John's. I don't see how Supreme Cook gives you these issues, but yeah, they got some players. Jaden Epps did well. Jay Heath off the bench. They're gonna upset some teams in Big East play. They're not gonna win more than I'll say 6 games, 6 and 14 maybe, but they're gonna certainly play some spoiler. But we mentioned Caravan, the other guy who had 20 points and hit 5 threes, Cam Spencer. I feel like that's a nightly. If he doesn't get 20 and hit 4 or 5 threes, what happened? I mean, he's just been a revelation. I think the top transfer in the Big East. There's a lot of great transfers. We saw one Xavier earlier in the week, Quincy Olivari. I mean, a bunch of good transfers on this Georgetown team I just mentioned, like Epps, but Spencer, I mean, the impact he has 6 and 9 from the field, 5 of 7 from three, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. I mentioned the 20 points. I mean, he's exceeding what we all, I say this every episode, but he exceeds our expectations we had on him going into the season. And we would not be the number one team in the country if Cam Spencer wasn't what he is.
No shot. Honestly, when he transferred here, I remember it was a late night thing. Um, I just figured he would be like a Joey California off the bench. I figured that the starting lineup was going to be Newton, Castle, Caravan, Johnson, and Clingan, and that he would just Spencer would be off the bench. I never imagined him starting. I never imagined him averaging 19 freaking points. Like I figured that he would just be a guy off the bench, but he has been a blessing and just another example of why we should not overreact if we miss on a guy like Nick Timberlake and just let the coaches do the job that they get paid millions of dollars to do. Because I remember the overreactions on not getting Timberlake, and I could name a million transfers. Oh, Hurley's the worst recruiter ever. Well, that's just not true. But just another example of why overreacting never gets anything solved. And more than 98% of the time, I say people are way wrong.
Yeah. And kind of staying with that, sometimes he gets guys that aren't immediately as impactful as you think they'd be. Hassan Diarra has been arguably our most important player, especially off the bench this season. He had 7 points all in the last 10 minutes of the game when it was kind of going back and forth. He hit a three there. He had a nice little move to the basket for a layup. His confidence offensively has really been the difference this year. Last year he's kind of not afraid to shoot, but he didn't really need to shoot with Joey and Aline off the bench, and you have Hawkins, Caravan, all these guys that can make threes. But now we don't have as many of those guys, and that's kind of his role. Obviously, he's the defensive guy. He's going to be up in your face for however long he plays, 20, 25 minutes. He's gonna get steals. He almost had that steal off the inbounds pass there early in, I believe, in the first half, but that's just the pesky player he is. If he's scoring 7 points per game, especially a guy like Solo Ball, who's kind of not regressed over the past couple of weeks, but hasn't really been what we saw while he was a starter, I feel like we really need those 7 to 10 points out of DR. And if he can bring that, I feel like our ceiling is really high.
Oh yeah, with Solo, it's just like once he got out of his starting position, Castle took those minutes. Even Stewart. And speaking of Stewart, he started a whole. I don't want to touch on this too much because I hate it, but I don't know if you saw it at all. But there was a huge argument on UConn Twitter about the nickname Stewie because the UConn men's Twitter account posted that like Stewie slams it home or something on his huge dunk in the second half, and like people were saying like if you're a fan of the men's team, you're not a fan of the women's team, and all of this blah blah blah. It's all stupid. But anyway, I feel like the narrative of people regressing is not necessarily correct because he didn't regress. He's just not playing as much because Castle is starting to get back to what he is. And honestly, I didn't expect Solo to play much at all this year because I figured Castle would just take those minutes. But when people get into foul trouble, then we need Solo off the bench. But I wouldn't say he's necessarily regressing, but he's just not getting as many minutes as he was getting when Castle was out.
Yeah, I think it's simply he's a guard. I'll say if we have four guards that are better than him, it's tough, especially getting into the teeth of Big East play, to have that fifth guard play consistent minutes. Especially you touched on Stewart, which that whole thing is ridiculous. I mean, there's more fans that are just of the women than there are just of the men. And I'm not gonna say it's older people, but I feel like there's a lot of older people that are
I mean,
just they follow
me
women's
personally, I'm a fan of
basketball.
both. I'm a fan of
Yeah,
both.
I definitely support. I don't watch that many women's games, but I definitely hope they win and support them. But yeah, that's really a stupid. No one
Yeah.
owns a nickname. I mean, if that's the first time Jalen Stewart's been called Stewie in his life, I mean, I don't know what I'd do. He's probably been called that since he was 1 years old, but that's not important. What's important that he has looked really good over the past few games. He only had 2 points and three rebounds, but a couple of big rebounds amongst those three. He played 14 minutes. He was out there in crunch time over a guy like Solo Ball when Spencer and Newton, everyone was in foul trouble. We'll get into that after this. The fouls were horrendous, but Stewart really held his own. He's been playing some small ball, power forward, a little bit of center. We saw a little center out of him in that Xavier game, but he is he's a guy I feel like we really need as like he'll end up being that ninth guy, which last year Hassan Diarra was our ninth guy, and look how important he was, even though he wasn't really a factor in the Final Four. But you need a guy like that to get to the Final Four, especially Caravan can't consistently play 38 minutes like he did against Georgetown. Maybe he could, but if he can play 32 and Stewart can give a solid 8 at that backup power forward, maybe get a bucket, that'd be massive for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really expecting Caravan to play 38 minutes a game. Nor am I hoping because that's just how somebody gets hurt. But Stewart has progressed really well. Um, he's starting to look kind of like an Isaiah Whaley type of
Hmm.
player. I think he's a little quicker than Whaley, but I mean that explosive move that he had for the dunk yesterday, well, I really like that. Like that was we never really I mean, that was like an Andre Jackson move, honestly. But I really like how he's progressed so far, how he's taking the most of his minutes that he gets, and he's playing well so far. But I think he's going to be a really important piece next year, especially with whoever leaves. I mean, it's looking like Caravan could be a first round pick, unless you're Jeff Goodman, of course, who thinks he's the worst basketball player on the planet. But anyway, he's looking like a first round pick. Obviously, Spencer out, Newton out. So who knows? But I feel like Stewart's going to be an important part of this team for the rest of the years and next year.
Let's see, who haven't we touched upon? Tristan Newton. 9 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. He stuffed the stat sheet, but 2 of 11 from the field, 0 of 6 from three. I'm not even gonna get into that. I'm not worried about him at all. He has struggled a little bit the past few games, but we've seen what he can do. I'm not. I feel like it's just a slump. He slumped around this time last year and then picked it up and was one of our most important players in the tournament run. So I'm especially with the guys we have around him. I'm not worried about that. Samson Johnson only played 12 minutes and he had 2 points, a rebound. He was in foul trouble in the first half. And the second half, we kind of just went with the hot hand of Caravan at the five and four guards around him. But yeah, let me get into fouls. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. There were 44 combined fouls, 63 combined free throws. I mean, you don't need that. We had four guys with four, two more with three. They had two guys foul out. It's just enough's enough. And they're just like these ticky tacky fouls that shouldn't be called. And they
It
call the
started in
ticky
the
tacky
Butler game.
ones. Yeah. They call the ticky tacky ones, but then you get mauled underneath and there's no contact, no call. But it's
Right.
just,
It's like, for heaven's sake, like it's even called like fouls that are on us against Butlers, like, or on the other team. Like they don't need to call those. Like let the game go.
yeah, it puts us in a tough spot. Like Yusuf Singare played, I don't know, it says a minute in the box score. It was probably more like 20 seconds and two 10-second spurts. Just because we had guys like Caravan, we don't want him to get that second foul late in the first half on defense. But I don't know. It's just, we wish we win. So I'm not too concerned about it. Once we lose a game off of that, it'll be more of an
Yep.
issue. But overall, just a solid team win. Probably, if I had to grade it, I'd say B to B minus. I mean,
Yeah.
not you don't. It's not an F. It's not a fail, but you certainly could have beat that Georgetown team by the 20, maybe even more that you were projected to. But yeah, Huskies 15-2. Next test, as we mentioned, Wednesday night at Gamble Pavilion, $2 beer night versus the number 18 Creighton Blue Jays, a team who has historically had success against us, but we did beat them last year. What's your first? I want to start there. What's your first initial thoughts? Obviously, we're number first game is number one. We're playing a team that has good history against us, and it's at home. But how you feeling?
I hope that Klingon plays. That's my first thought because Kalkbrenner is good. He is big. And Samson has done fine against centers, but I don't know if he could defend Kalkbrenner, honestly. He did fine against Soriano because Soriano didn't play fantastic, but I'm not the most confident person if he can defend Kalkbrenner well. And especially if we have to start doubling him, and that leaves Baylor Shireman wide open. So I just really hope that he plays, but we need that place as loud as possible because that's why we won last year because that place was bumping and Creighton just folded. So they're a good team again, obviously this year, but we need Gamble as loud as possible.
Yeah, students are back on campus. I believe classes start Tuesday, tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. It's gonna be very loud at Gamble. It's really our first big game this year at Gamble because who have we played there? We played DePaul in Big East play. I think that's our
Yep,
only Big East game, and the
that was
rest
fun.
were the rest were little non-conference games versus NAU, and I
Yeah,
don't even remember Pine Bluff maybe was there. I lose track of who's where. But this is one of our I'd say one of our at least two big games to Gamble, at least games that might be close. That and I believe Villanova. I don't think we should be playing a Providence close. They're not very good. We'll get into that
well, it
later.
was
And
going to be close, but
it was going to be close, but yeah, they lost Bryce Hopkins. They're looking like a bottom three team in the conference. And I guess Seton Hall is there in March. I forgot about that. That might be a close game if they continue to be as
that's
good. But
senior day too.
it is, yeah. But this is our premier Gamble home game for the students. This one, you mentioned Kalkbrenner. I feel like that we do see some Klingon in this one just to give him a different look. I mean, they're obviously planning for him to play. I assume Creighton at least making their game plan. Like this guy, he looked like he could have gone against Georgetown. He looked good in warmups. He was doing the dribbling drills and he was in layup lines, but ultimately didn't suit up. But I agree. I don't like Sampson against him for 40 minutes. I think if Sampson's against him, you might get like 10 minutes before he fouls out, honestly. He
Yeah,
has some fouling issues, but and I don't
he's
love
just going to start
Caravan.
reaching.
Yeah, I don't love Caravan. I like Caravan at the five at times and spurts, but I
Not
don't like
on
Caravan.
Kalkbrenner.
guarding Kalkbrenner. That's a recipe for disaster. But you mentioned Baylor Shireman's another guy to look out for. He's averaging 18 points per game. He's a sniper from deep. He's averaging 8 rebounds as well, almost 4 assists. He's another guy who's up there with Caravan as a Big East Player of the Year front runner, in my opinion. But you got to look out for him, Kalkbrenner, and Trey Alexander's averaging over 16 points per game. That's really their big three. They got some solid supporting cast members. Stephen Ashworth, who transferred in, he's averaging 8 points per game. Mason Miller, who's their fifth starter, averaging 7. They don't get much from the bench. They get solid run out of their guys, but I feel like our bench is better even without Donovan. If our bench is just Diarra, Solo Ball, Stewart, I still feel like our bench is better than theirs. But this is not going to be an easy game by any means. Like I mentioned, we're six. No, they're 6-1. We're 1-6 against them all time. The one win was at Gamble last year in early January. Sonogo had a great game, kind of destroyed
Hmm.
Kalkbrenner. Well, we can say he destroyed him. He did. And the guys that kind of beat us in that game, I remember just because I'm picturing that game. Arthur Kaluma had 16 rebounds on Caravan. He's not there anymore. And their power forward Mason Miller's not going to get 16 rebounds. If he does, you can go back to this clip. I'd be shocked. But yeah, I feel like this is a great game to be our first as number one, and I feel like it's a winnable game. And if we win this game and win versus Nova, we're primed to be number one for a long time.
Yeah, this is a game where if we beat Creighton and Gamble, we stay number one no matter what. I don't care if Purdue beats the USA Dream Team. We stay at number one.
Yeah, I think in order to secure this one, we're really going to have to limit them from the perimeter. Like I mentioned, Shireman's a great shooter, Trey Alexander, all those role players who I kind of named it didn't. They all can shoot the three. Creighton's really a three and Kalkbrenner team. They don't do a lot of driving. They don't do a lot of mid-range shots. It's really they emphasize from the perimeter. And I feel like we got guys that can guard that. I feel like we do a solid job of guarding the three. Georgetown only made 4. I think they went 4 for 16, if I'm not mistaken. So we've been guarding the three well recently. Xavier really didn't take any threes. I guess we didn't do an episode after that. That was an ugly game defensively in the paint. They got everything they wanted because we didn't have Donovan down there. But all in all, if we guard the three, I'm really confident we can pull this one out.
Yeah, I mean we've done a good job with it this year, but I think Creighton's one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the Big East. And they're also a team where they'll pass it around 16 times to find the open shot, and that's going to tire our guys out. So I feel like Hurley's got to have some plan of how to defend the perimeter, but also inside without having all 5 guys in the same area. If Kalkbrenner gets the ball, you don't want 3 people over there, but you also don't want 5 guys on the perimeter. So I think Hurley
Hmm.
obviously has a plan, but this is going to be our toughest game so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially in Big East play. I agree. I'm pulling up
That's
Creighton.
that's what I meant. Big East
Yeah,
play,
yeah, yeah,
toughest
yeah.
Big East game so far.
Yeah, I'm pulling up Creighton now, what they've done recently. I didn't watch this game on Saturday, but they beat St. John's by 1 at home, which
That
that's
there's a whole
interesting.
controversy to that too
Yeah,
about a foul and
I
stuff.
know what happened. I didn't see the clip, but I don't know. No matter what, they beat St. John's at home. They beat one at DePaul. They beat a depleted Providence at home by just 9. They won at Georgetown. What else did they do? That's right. They did start 0-2 in Big East play. They lost at Marquette, and then they lost at home in overtime in the Big East opener against Villanova. So they're certainly a vulnerable team. Obviously, every team in the conference is lost. We're all vulnerable, but I find it hard to believe that Creighton comes into Gamble against number one UConn and wins. Especially, I saw this stat. I saw some Creighton Twitter person say it, so I didn't fact check it, but they've never beaten the number one team before. I don't envision this scenario, $2 beer night, students at Gamble
No
being
way.
the one game. Yeah, no way. But it's gonna be a great game no matter what. If you can make it out to Gamble, it is a Wednesday night, so it might be tough for people. It'll just be cool to be at the first game. You can say I was at the first game. We've been number one in 15 years. So that's certainly an accomplishment for the team to be able to say that. But I think we could move on to our players to watch for this game. I can let you go first. I feel like we can really choose anyone here, but who you got?
This is a tough one, but I think that I'm going to go with Castle because he's due for a breakout game, and I'm not. Uh, Their guards, I'm way more concerned about Creighton's big guys than like I don't expect Klingon to get a lot of points. I feel like he's just going to be in there to defend Kalkbrenner. I mean, Caravan will probably have a lot, but I think this is a game for Castle and Spencer to go off.
Okay. I'm gonna go a little different route. I'm just gonna say my player to watch is Donovan Clingan because I think he plays. I mean, you got to watch to see if he plays or not. I think he plays. Hurley did say he's going to ease him in. He's going to come off the bench when he first comes back for the first couple of games, kind of in that backup role he played last year. So, yeah, I think we'll see him. I didn't think we had a chance versus Georgetown. Obviously, he didn't play, but he was warming up like he was going to play. So that's certainly a good thing. But yeah, I think we do see Donovan Clingan, and our defense is really gonna improve because if you look at KenPom right now, I'm pretty sure we fell down 2 spots from 5 to 7 in KenPom after that Georgetown game
No,
because
wow.
our defense took such a hit because we like didn't win by what we were supposed to, which that's how that works. I'm not going to complain about it. They usually really favor us. So if this one stretch without our best defender, we go down, so be it. We're the number 3 offense in the country, last I saw, and the number 40 defense, but we were both top 10 when Klingon was playing. That'll get back up there probably by February once he got his feet wet. But yeah,
Please
I
don't
think
get
that'll
hurt again. That's
yeah,
all I ask. Please
you
do
gotta
not
be
get hurt
careful.
again.
I feel like he'll be limited, assuming he comes back versus Creighton. I feel like he'll be limited in first Creighton and Nova, and then we have 8 days off after that Nova game. I feel like we'll see full, however, whatever full is for him, 25
Yeah,
minutes maybe.
he'll start that Xavier game, I'll bet.
Yeah, I guarantee that'll be his first start. I don't envision him coming off the bench still after a week plus of no games, but we also have no insight if he's playing, but just assuming with the matchup and all that, he will be out there. Hurley did say we're on Kling Kong watch, but yeah, that'll do it here, episode 55. The first episode we've ever done as number one in the AP poll because we did not do this podcast back in 2009, the last time we were. It's a great day for Huskies fans. It's a great day for the program. Great day for the university. They can flex that a little bit. We're number one team in the country, but yeah, we're gonna try to get back to our consistent schedules. I think uploading in between every game. We'll certainly try to get one out between Creighton and Nova, and we'll work from there. But yeah, thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next one.